There are rises that feel inevitable, and falls that arrive like shadows swallowing the last trace of light. For Lindsay Lohan, once America's brightest sweetheart, the descent did not come in a single moment. It arrived quietly, slowly, hidden behind the blinding flash of cameras that never seemed to turn away. She had everything the world celebrates: fame at 11, fortune exceeding over $30 million at her peak, and a presence that could soften even the harshest critics. Yet behind the glitter, a darker reality shaped itself in silence. Her Hollywood home, tucked away behind tall hedges and restless photographers, carried the weight of a life splitting in two. On good days, sunlight spilled across polished floors, dancing over scripts and trophies that once marked her triumphs. On bad days, the rooms felt dimmer, air heavy, blinds half drawn, footsteps echoing through spaces too large for one person to inhabit without the comfort of certainty. Outside, the world believed it knew her story. Inside, the truth lived in quiet corners, unfinished journal entries, unanswered phone calls, sleepless nights where the only sound was the ticking of a clock she could not outrun. How does a girl adored by millions become the woman critics label Hollywood's tragedy? How does a star, once so bright, slip into shadows while the world watches? The answer is not scandal, not gossip, but a long unraveling, a slow erosion of innocence under the weight of expectation, addiction, scrutiny, and a public that demanded more than any young woman could give. Comment un tel nom a-t-il pu vaciller dans un silence que personne n'a voulu entendre? To Lindsay Lohan's ascent was the kind of Hollywood story people still whisper about, the rare moment when talent, timing, and destiny collide to create a phenomenon. Born in New York in 1986, she stepped into the spotlight before she could fully understand its heat. Modeling at 3, appearing in over 60 commercials before turning 10, fame grew around her like a second skin. But it wasn't until 1998 that the world saw the spark that would define her. The Parent Trap didn't just introduce Lindsay Lohan, it announced her. She played twins with such effortless charm, witty, warm, impossibly natural, that critics compared her to legends of a different era. Hollywood hadn't seen a child star like her in decades. She was magnetic, radiant, precociously self-assured. Suddenly, every studio wanted her. Every casting director remembered her, and every door in Los Angeles swung open at the mere sound of her name. Then came Freaky Friday, Mean Girls, Herbie, Fully Loaded, a golden era, a sequence of hits that transformed her from promising newcomer into one of the most bankable young actresses in the industry. At 19, she was everywhere. Red carpets, magazine covers, late-night interviews where her laughter filled the room with a youthful confidence that felt unbreakable. People didn't just admire her, they adored her. She embodied early 2000s Hollywood, playful, glamorous, unpredictable, a blend of innocence and rebellion that seemed almost scripted for stardom. But inside this meteoric rise lived a truth the world didn't want to see. A young woman growing up under a magnifying glass, pushed into adulthood faster than she was ready for. A teenager expected to behave like a star while still learning who she was. A girl entering an industry where applause lasts seconds and pressure lasts forever. Behind the infectious smile, behind the gifted performances, behind the meteoric success, something subtle began to shift. The glow remained bright, but the shadows lengthened. Hollywood had given her everything: fame, fortune, influence. But it had also given her the one thing no child should ever have to carry: a world watching her every move, waiting to witness the moment she might stumble. Et dans cette lumière trop vive, les premières fissures ont commencé à apparaître, silencieuses mais profondes. 3. As Lindsay Lohan moved deeper into her 20s, the glow that once surrounded her began to flicker. The world still adored her, or at least the version of her it believed she should be. But behind the cameras, pressure collected like storm clouds gathering with silent intent. Her life, once painted in soft shades of youth and promise, gradually shifted into something harsher. What the public saw were magazine covers, red carpets, film premieres. What they didn't see were the fractures forming beneath the surface. Her relationship with her family was strained. A mix of love, chaos, financial dependence, and emotional conflict. Hollywood had handed a teenager a life-size kingdom, and those closest to her weren't always prepared to protect her from its weight. Parties became distractions, late nights became routines. Each misstep became a headline. Paparazzi trailed her cars at all hours, engines rumbling behind her like predators circling their prey. Inside her home, the silence grew thick. Scripts lay unopened on the kitchen counter. Clothes remained scattered across the bedroom floor. The once bright living room felt dimmer, as though the walls themselves absorbed her exhaustion. It was during these years that her struggles, already whispered, became louder. Late arrivals on set, missed rehearsals, rumors of alcohol, of substances, of spiraling routines. Every mistake magnified, every stumble documented. But the world rarely asked why. They preferred the spectacle over the truth. Hollywood had built her image, but now it began to dismantle her with the same intensity. Directors hesitated to hire her. Insurance companies refused to cover her. Roles slipped away before she could reach for them. The girl who once carried entire films now found herself fighting simply to be taken seriously. And yet, in quiet moments she never spoke publicly about, she tried to regain control. Therapy appointments, attempts at sobriety, short bursts of focus that faded under the weight of loneliness. By 2007, the tension had become undeniable. The car accidents, the mugshots, the court dates, the rehab stints that came too late, too rushed, too public. Her life became a loop of chaos, a cycle she didn't know how to break, while millions watched as though waiting for the next episode of a tragic series they felt entitled to witness. Et dans ces dernières années avant l'effondrement, le silence autour d'elle n'était plus un refuge, mais un avertissement. By the summer of 2007, Lindsay Lohan's life had become a quiet storm circling toward impact. Hollywood watched, not with concern, but with anticipation. Paparazzi engines revved at every corner. Headlines sharpened their tone. And Lindsay, barely in her 20s, carried the weight of a world waiting for her to fall. The night everything collapsed didn't explode all at once. It unfolded slowly, painfully, like a candle burning to its final ember. There were 2 DUI arrests within weeks, flashing red and blue lights bouncing off the glossy streets of Los Angeles. Sirens pierced the night, cameras swarmed, faces pressed against windows, recording her lowest moments with hunger disguised as curiosity. Mugshots circulated within minutes, eyes tired, expression vacant, spirit heavy. Inside her home, hours before one of those nights, the air had been unsettlingly still. A half-empty bottle on the counter, missed phone calls lighting up the screen. Shoes kicked off near the doorway, as though she entered the house in a rush to escape something invisible and relentless. Her breathing had grown shallow, her steps uncertain, her mind frayed between exhaustion and desperation. Friends tried to intervene. Some arrived too late. Others didn't know what to say. The world outside assumed she didn't care. But inside, she cared too much, about everything, all at once. About the pressure, the expectations, the noise, the loneliness that settled into her like a permanent shadow. Court dates followed. Probation, mandatory rehab. TMZ vans parked outside every facility she entered. Journalists dissected her mistakes as entertainment. The world judged her without pause, without empathy, without remembering she was still just a young woman trying to survive the chaos she didn't know how to control. At night, alone in dimly lit rehab rooms, she stared at the ceiling, wondering how a girl once loved by millions had become a cautionary tale in real time. Her silence wasn't defiance. It was grief, a grief the world never bothered to name. Her collapse wasn't a single event. It was a slow drowning, a series of moments where the water rose higher and the world kept filming instead of reaching out a hand. Et cette nuit-là, Hollywood n'a pas seulement vu Lindsay tomber, il l'a regardée disparaître dans un silence qu'elle ne pouvait plus porter seule. 5. After the collapse, Lindsay Lohan's world split into 2 timelines, the one the public consumed through sensational headlines, and the one she lived quietly in the spaces far from cameras. A world defined by courtrooms, sterile rehab facilities, whispered apologies, and the long, painful work of rebuilding a life that had unraveled too quickly. Her net worth, once soaring toward $30 million, began to shrink. Legal fees, treatment costs, lost roles, every misstep had a price. Every headline carved another dent into her financial stability. But the real loss wasn't money, it was trust. Studios hesitated, brands backed away. Even friends kept their distance, unsure whether they were helping her or just feeding the spectacle that followed her everywhere. Inside rehab, time moved differently. Dawn crept through narrow windows. Counselors spoke in gentle voices. The days were structured, disciplined, painfully honest. Lindsay attended group sessions, sat in circles with strangers who carried their own private wars. In those rooms, stripped of fame and pretense, she spoke words she had buried for years. She cried without hiding. She listened. She learned the contours of a pain she had spent half her life trying to outrun. When she left treatment, the world remained unchanged, still loud, still judgmental, still eager to see whether she would collapse again. But she had changed. Her home became quieter, cleaner, more deliberate. She moved through the rooms slowly, touching surfaces as if reacquainting herself with reality. Kitchen counters cleared of clutter, a single journal on the nightstand, warm lamplight filling spaces once swallowed by darkness. She burned old scripts she no longer identified with. She deleted contacts that led her back into chaos. She began again, carefully, intentionally. Her attempt at a comeback started not with a blockbuster, but with small steps, a guest appearance, an independent film, a business venture. She took roles that fit her new rhythm, not the frenzied pace of her past. Even when Hollywood doubted her, she kept going, not boldly, but quietly, steadily. Years later, when she moved abroad, the world interpreted it as retreat, but for her it was survival. A chance to breathe in a place where her name didn't echo quite so loudly. A chance to walk streets without being hunted. A chance to feel like a person instead of a headline. And then slowly, the mystery began to rebuild her image. Fans resurfaced. Interviews softened. The public, older now, looked at her story with fresher eyes. Eyes capable of empathy instead of judgment. Today, Lindsay Lohan is not the cautionary tale people once branded her as. She is a woman who fell apart under circumstances few could endure, and who learned to piece herself back together without applause, without spectacle, without needing the world's permission. But even now, certain rooms of her story remain locked. The lonely nights only she remembers, the voices she had to silence, the shadows she learned to carry with grace. These are not secrets of scandal. They are the quiet residues of survival. Et dans les ruines d'une vie exposée trop tôt, elle a reconstruit quelque chose de plus fragile, mais aussi plus vrai. 6. In the quiet of later years, Lindsay Lohan's story no longer reads like a headline. It reads like a testament to what happens when a young woman is placed at the center of an industry that consumes innocence as quickly as it celebrates it. She was once America's sweetheart, then Hollywood's obsession, then its cautionary tale. But beneath every label, every scandal, every whispered judgment, there was always something the world refused to acknowledge: her humanity. Fame gave her everything. Fame took almost everything away. But it never managed to extinguish the small flame she kept alive in silence. Today, Lindsay stands not as the tragedy the world proclaimed, but as the survivor the world underestimated. She rebuilt herself in fragments, in new cities, in quieter places, in moments away from the blinding cameras that once dictated her every breath. She reclaimed her privacy, her voice, her sense of self. And while the scars of her past remain, they are no longer marks of shame. They are the proof of a battle fought in the open, under the most unforgiving light imaginable. Her story is not about falling apart. It is about learning to rise in a world that wanted her to break. So what remains of Lindsay Lohan today? Not the headlines, not the mugshots, not the chaos, but the quiet resilience of a woman who survived the noise. Le silence ne tue pas la mémoire, il la purifie. Silence does not kill memory, it purifies it. And in that purified silence, Lindsay's story stands. Not as Hollywood's tragedy, but as Hollywood's reminder. that even those who fall hardest can still find their way back to the light.